Everyone thinks happiness looks the same. Fame, success, applause. But the people who truly understand happiness know something else entirely. And sometimes the quietest endings belong to the biggest lives. At the height of his success, Dan Blocker had everything most actors spend a lifetime chasing: stability, respect, and a role that made him feel permanent. There were no warning signs, no slow unraveling, no sense that tragedy was waiting just around the corner. Life felt steady, predictable, safe. And then, suddenly, it wasn't. What followed was swift, devastating, and final. A silence settled in that only grew louder with time. And while the world mourned loudly, one person chose to grieve in a way Hollywood almost never sees. Dan Blocker's wife, Dolphia, didn't step forward. She didn't give interviews. She didn't become the public face of loss. She disappeared. And in doing so, their final chapter became one of Hollywood's quietest tragedies. Dan Blocker was a giant shaped by hard times. On Bonanza, Little Joe may have had the charm and the looks, but it was Hoss Cartwright who captured hearts. Big, shy, slightly awkward, endlessly kind. Hoss had a softness that made him impossible not to love. A gentle soul wrapped in a towering frame. And that spirit didn't come from acting alone. It came directly from the man himself. Dan Blocker entered the world already larger than life. Born on December 10, 1928, in DeKalb, Texas, he weighed an astonishing 14 pounds, still holding the record as the largest baby ever born in Bowie County. From the very beginning, his life was something people talked about, and that never really stopped. His parents moved the family to the tiny town of O'Donnell, Texas, population barely 800. After losing everything in the Great Depression, Dan's father scraped together enough money to open a small grocery store. The family lived behind it, and Dan helped however he could, often carrying groceries for customers. His size was a running joke, so big he kept breaking things. No one yet realized that same size would one day become his greatest strength. In O'Donnell, Saturday nights meant entertainment, and sometimes that entertainment was Dan himself. If anyone wanted to test their strength, Dan would be waiting. They'd rope off part of Main Street, and he'd take on all challengers. According to Blocker, he never lost. By his teens, he weighed nearly 275 pounds and knew exactly what he was capable of. That confidence followed him into sports and school. At 13, he joined the Texas Military Institute, earning a football scholarship to Sul Ross State University. He planned to study English. Acting wasn't part of the plan until fate stepped in. The drama club needed someone strong enough to move heavy props. Dan took the job. Then someone suggested he take a small role on stage. That moment changed everything. The energy of the audience, the feeling of being seen. It grabbed him completely. Dan switched his major to theater and never looked back. After graduation, he turned down professional football offers and chased a dream he hadn't even known existed. Then came the war. Drafted during the Korean War, Dan Blocker served on the front lines for over 200 consecutive days. During a deadly ambush, he held his position under heavy fire for more than 4 hours, protecting his unit while a wounded soldier lay trapped nearby. He survived. Many didn't. He returned home a decorated sergeant, forever changed by what he had seen. War took something from him, especially his belief in guns. Though he carried them on screen, he despised them in real life. He owned none. Wouldn't allow hunting in his household. Violence, to him, was never entertainment. After the war, Dan married Dolphia Parker, earned a master's degree in dramatic arts, and became a schoolteacher. Teaching paid the bills. Acting was still just a love on the side. That changed in the mid-1950s when television westerns exploded. His size made him impossible to ignore. Small roles became steady work. Then came Bonanza. When Dan Blocker was cast as Hoss Cartwright, everything changed. Bonanza wasn't an instant hit. In fact, it nearly got canceled. But once it found its audience, it became one of the most beloved shows in television history. And Hoss became its emotional center. What audiences never realized was how different Dan Blocker was from Hoss. Dan was highly educated, deeply thoughtful, politically progressive, and intellectually curious. Yet they shared one powerful trait: compassion. That authenticity is why Haas never felt fake. He felt real. Off-screen, Dan was tough in ways few people knew. Once thrown from a horse, he fractured his collarbone, set it himself, climbed back on, and finished the scene. He didn't talk about his war service. He didn't chase praise. He just did the work. Fame, however, made him deeply uncomfortable. He loved acting but hated stardom. He and Dolphia chose a modest home, avoided Hollywood parties, and protected their children fiercely. Being recognized everywhere exhausted him. Strangers touching him, crowds forming, family moments disappearing. So he made a radical decision. Dan Blocker packed up his family and moved to Lugano, Switzerland. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about taxes. It was about peace. In Lugano, no one knew Haas Cartwright. Bonanza aired in German, and most locals didn't watch it. For the first time in years, Dan Blocker could walk down the street as just a man. He found what fame had never given him: quiet. But peace doesn't stop fate. In 1972, Dan returned to the U.S. to begin what would become his final season of Bonanza. He felt weak, tired. Doctors discovered gallstones and scheduled what was considered a routine surgery. The operation went smoothly. He was sent home, optimistic, relieved. Hours later, everything collapsed. Dan Blocker suffered a massive pulmonary embolism. A blood clot reached his lungs. He died suddenly, without warning, at just 43 years old. The loss shattered everyone: his castmates, his fans, but most of all his family. And once again, Dolphia chose silence. She never chased attention, never capitalized on his fame, never remarried. She raised their children privately and lived exactly the way they had always wanted, quietly, deliberately, with dignity. Dan Blocker created something rare, a character that symbolized kindness in a violent world. And in the end, he lived by that same belief. He didn't chase stardom. He didn't cling to fame. He chose peace. And then, far too soon, he was gone.